Look, people are done with the trans thing. They've had enough of it. This whole, you know, they're just kind of regular people like you and me, but happen to dress up like with. No, that's not really what's going on. You've unleashed an entire fleet of mentally ill lunatics on the public, and now we have to deal with the fallout of it.
I find that really frightening. I mean, why would you say someone was mentally ill because they feel they were born in the wrong body? I mean, does that give you pleasure or joy to just stamp down on someone's, personhood? What's the intent here?
Do you value truth?
In this one, Andrew Wilson faces woke Ava Santina in a heated and rather hilarious debate brought on by the arrest of a British comedian in the airport after a trip to the United States for a series of comedic posts released back in April about trans women, aka biological men, being in women's spaces like restrooms, locker rooms, and women's sports. And if you're curious about the word woke and its definition, just watch as Ava Santina demonstrates what I perceive as woke behavior, her fear, her projections, and her lack of understanding of common sense issues, which can only be explained by cultish-like behavior similarly seen by folks who suffer from Trump derangement syndrome. But enough about her. The real star of this video is Andrew Wilson, as Andrew Wilson, in his own comedic way, completely dismantles Ava Santina's arguments one by one in a manner that only Andrew Wilson is capable to display. Now let's have a look at this debate between Ava Santina and Andrew Wilson.
I want to start with this breaking news story today, which in many ways is, to me, symbolic of the mess that my country is getting itself into, not just on immigration and asylum, but also fundamentally about free speech. The father Ted, co-creator Graham Linehan, one of the most popular comedies in UK TV history, was arrested today after arriving back at Heathrow on a flight from the United States. And he revealed in an online Substack article that officials became highly concerned for his health when his blood pressure raised to over 200 and took him to hospital. That's been confirmed by the police. But he says 5 armed cops seized him and arrested him at the airport. And why did they do that? Because in April, he did these 3 tweets, or posts as they're now called on X. If a trans-identified male is in a female-only space, he is committing a violent, abusive act. Make a scene, call the cops, and if all else fails, punch him in the balls. The second one, commenting on a picture of a trans demonstration, he wrote, "A photo you can smell." The third one, "I hate them, misogynists and homophobes." The M for them. Let me start with you, Ava. No one would dispute that the language he uses there is inflammatory. He's a comedian, so he would argue he's being funny, but also making a mocking point about the massive issue of the last few years, about the issue of trans women in women's spaces, be it in sport, be it with safety, be it with equality. Is it right, in your mind, that he should be seized by 5 armed police officers on his re-entry to the United Kingdom? Do you feel comfortable with that happening to somebody for a few inflammatory, comedically intended posts on social media?
I think you're going to be very surprised by my answer, and I would say that I don't think it's right that he has been arrested. I think that he has made a career out of being hateful. I think that what he does to that community is incredibly dangerous, and I worry about the trans men and women who have to experience the fallout of his disgusting tirades every single day. But it does scare me that he was arrested, and it scares me that people are being arrested for what they're posting on social media. And I think that the government here and the Metropolitan Police need to be clearer about what the parameters are of what you can and can't post online if they're going to legislate on it. I think the worry, though, is that many trans people don't know how to deal with the vitriol or the fallout after he's had one of his explosions. I mean, you can't sue him, you can't shut him up, but every single day they have to deal with the tirade that falls on them.
Well, his tirades, as you put it, are based on a firmly held belief by him that is shared by many other people.
I don't care about his
Well, hang on.
beliefs.
Let me finish my point. The comments he makes, all right, they can be expressed in an inflammatory way, as I've said, but that actually underpinning it is his argument that the trans activist lobby, for want of a different phrase, but the activist lobby supporting trans rights has spent the last few years traducing and reducing women's rights to fairness, equality, and safety, and that it's actually the refusal to deal with that central problem, both in the United States, the United Kingdom, and other countries, that has led to such rage on behalf of women's rights.
The rage comes from trans people existing, which is what I find extraordinarily dangerous. You know, I work with trans people. Friends of mine are trans. You know, the sort of the danger and the vitriol that is spread across our tabloids every single day, I have never, ever experienced or seen. And honestly, I just think he needs a new bit. I think, you know, maybe it would be helpful for him if he wrote a new show or wrote a new play and just left these people alone.
She claims that the rage people are experiencing comes from the idea that trans people exist is complete bullcrap. Is that what you're experiencing? It's not what I'm experiencing. My rage comes from the fact that these trans individuals who are literally suffering from gender dysphoria are somehow, for some reason, the people that are taking pew-pews and going to Christian schools, massacring young students that believe in God. That's where my rage comes from. My rage comes from the fact that there's doctors out there still continually issuing puberty blockers and doing surgeries to people that are under 18 and not being held accountable for the fact that they're not addressing the true problem at hand, which is what's going on in the person's head, and instead prescribing medicine that doesn't address the root of the problem, and at the same time, they choose to create a lifelong patient, right? Anybody that goes in and has this type of, trans surgery or going on some type of medication, a puberty blocker, a estrogen or whatever, they basically have to maintain that for the rest of their life in order to maintain their new chosen lifestyle. These doctors are not being held accountable for the damage that they're doing, which in my opinion is complete malpractice. Also, my rage comes from the fact that there are little girls and women in women's sports, in bathrooms, in women's locker rooms that are basically being forced to give up their rights of privacy, their rights of fair competition, and it's costly beyond just the competition itself. These women are losing out on scholarships. They're losing out on many, many opportunities that they can never get back. My rage doesn't come from the fact that trans people exist, because if they simply minded their own business, nobody would care.
Let me bring Andrew Wilson in here. So Andrew, Graham Linehan, I'm not even sure if you're familiar with him, but he's one of the most successful comedy people in the country over here. But he's been at the centre of this debate for a long time with his very stark views about this trans issue. He's been bailed by the UK police, but only with the condition that he doesn't go on X. He wrote on Substack, in a country where paedophiles escape sentencing, where knife crime is out of control, where women are assaulted and harassed every time they gather to speak, the state have mobilised 5 armed officers to arrest a comedy writer. What is your response to that?
Well, his tweets are satirical in nature. It is comedy based. She's right. He shouldn't have been arrested, but she's also wrong in the fact that, look, people are done with the trans thing. They've had enough of it. This whole, they're just kind of regular people like you and me, but happen to dress up like. No, that's not really what's going on. You've unleashed an entire fleet of mentally ill lunatics on the public, and now we have to deal with the fallout of it. We have to deal with having to deal with these people on a day-to-day basis. A lot of people are sick of it. This guy is just echoing the thing which is in a lot of our minds, which is that, hey, we're kind of tired of these mentally ill lunatics on our streets. We really are.
Ava?
I find that really frightening. I mean, why would you say someone was mentally ill because they feel they were born in the wrong body? I mean, does that give you pleasure or joy to just stamp down on someone's, personhood? What's the intent here?
Do you value truth? Because
of course I value truth, yeah.
Good. Then here's what's true. What's true is that if you're a man, you can't be a woman. And if you're a woman, you can't be a man. That's what's true.
I don't think it's helpful to get into
Hang on. I'll let you talk, but let me finish. Your attempt to gaslight everybody into the opposition of this truth builds resentment. And it's that resentment that you have to deal with. And you have done it to yourself. Like most of these things, the left does it to themselves. It's very obvious. People are not going to accept this. The trans agenda has stalled, and it stalled out the LGBTQ agenda with it because you're trying to gaslight people into something which is obviously not true.
I think that, if you look just 30 years ago in the United Kingdom, we were treating gay men in the same way that we are now treating trans people. The mood does shift and the mood moves. And, I think that the stalwart belief here that we need to hold is that if someone does feel that they are born in the wrong body, it does not affect me as a woman if they decide that they are going to be a trans woman. It doesn't affect me. It doesn't change the rape conviction rate.
All right,
it doesn't change the rate of assault.
Okay, but Ava, I'll bring Ben in here, but let me just say, as somebody who's always, consider myself to be pretty liberal-minded, the moment this campaign started, for example, to allow trans women who are biological men and they become identified as trans women, okay, I've got no problem with people being trans. If they want to do that, I respect them. I want them to have rights to safety, equality, and the rest of it. But the moment somebody tries to persuade me that allowing biological men who identify as trans women to compete in women's sport against actual women with women's bodies, which are, because we separate the sexes and things like the Olympics, which we know are inferior in terms of power and strength, endurance, and so on, the moment people try to persuade me that is fair and equitable, I think they are absolute lunatics. And I'm not even sure they even believe it when they say it. So part of the problem here, it seems to me, and I'll bring Ben in here to comment on this, but part of the problem is that the trans lobby has brought a lot of this stuff on themselves. Right? If they had just gone about this in a different way and had simply fought equality, I would be absolutely leading the charge. But
cease to exist?
Well, hang on.
What do you want them to do?
I want them to have equality and safety and fairness, but not at the expense of eroding women's rights. Ben?
Well, I agree with that. And fundamentally, the feeling that you're a woman when you're in fact biologically a man is a mental health issue. That's how it's defined. And of course, if someone wants to identify as a woman, even though they are a man, fine, that's their prerogative. But for the regulatory and legislative environment in which we now live, effectively to progressively discriminate in their favour, not for them to be equal, but for them to have the right to go into women's loos, compete with women in sport, go into women's prisons, all these things is an assault on the very form of liberalism that emancipated women and brought women to an equal footing with men. And now, in the pursuit of what I would call ultra-liberalism, we're setting aside women's rights. We've lost sight of common sense in our society. And what we've got to go back to is that commonsensical position. Just because a man identifies as a woman, that does not make him a woman. And he should not be allowed to infringe on women's personal spaces.
Well, actually, I mean, it's no longer a question of opinion here, of individual opinions. The UK Supreme Court has said this.
Exactly.
The British Prime Minister has finally come around to saying this.
I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, make sure to hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe to the channel. And I want to remind you, you can catch me live on the Jar Openers podcast on this channel every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. It lasts for about 2 hours. We have a great growing community over there, and I'd love to have you guys join us.